Hello everyone. Welcome back to the AWS channel. I am Pranjit Viswas and I'm going to show you something that's going to completely transform how you can create and document your AWS architecture diagrams. How many of you have spent hours manually drawing architecture diagrams only to have them become outdated the moment you deploy a change, or struggle to keep your documentation in sync with your actual infrastructure? Well, what if I told you that you can now generate professional AWS architecture diagrams in seconds directly from your command line using nothing but natural language? So today we are going to dive into one of the most exciting integrations I have seen this year, which is combining Amazon Q CLI with the Model Context Protocol or MCP to automatically generate beautiful, accurate AWS architecture diagrams. We're talking about going from a simple text description like show me a 3-tier web application with auto scaling to a complete professional diagram in under 30 seconds. So in the next few minutes, I'll show you how to set up this powerful combination of Amazon Q CLI and MCP, generate multiple types of AWS architecture diagrams using just natural language prompts, customize and iterate on your diagrams instantly, and also how you can integrate this into your daily workflow as a solution architect. Whether you are documenting existing infrastructure, designing new solutions, or need to quickly visualize architectures for stakeholder presentations, this is going to be a game changer for your productivity. So fire up your terminal and let's dive into the future of AWS architecture documentation. Trust me, by the end of this video, you will never want to manually draw another architecture diagram again. So before we get started, let's have a quick refresher on MCP and what is MCP all about. So the MCP or Model Context Protocol uses a client-server architecture containing the following components. The first one is a host, which is a program or AI tool that requires access to data through the MCP protocol, such as Anthropic's Cloud Desktop, an IDE or integrated development environment, AWS MCP CLI, or other AI applications. The second one is client, protocol clients that maintain one-to-one connections with server. Server is the third one, which is about lightweight programs that expose capabilities through standardized MCP or act as tools. Fourth is the data sources. The local data sources such as databases and file systems or external systems available over the internet through APIs that MCP servers can connect with. Now, before we get started with the demo, there are some prerequisites that we need to ensure that it is there in your system. So I have assumed for the sake of time that you have already installed Amazon Q Developer CLI in whatever operating system that you have in your desktop or laptop. So the documentation of how to install Amazon Q Developer CLI, if someone is new to it, I'm going to provide that in the description of this video. So please do refer to the documentation if you haven't installed the Amazon Q Developer CLI and follow the steps. Once the Amazon Q Developer CLI is installed in your laptop, the second important part of this setup is setting up the MCP servers. Now there are few steps within setting up this MCP servers. The first one is installing UV. The second one is installing Python 3.10 or newer. The third one is installing GraphViz, which is an open source graph visualization software for your operating system. For me, it's already installed. So I'm going to give you the link of the GraphViz where you can download your specific installer file to install it. And fourth is adding the MCP servers that you plan to use within your prompts or natural language prompts from the AWS GitHub repo of the MCP servers. And I have given a small snippet of the MCP servers that I'm going to add to the mcp.json file in the location that you see in this presentation. With that, Now let's get started with the demo. So I have my Visual Studio IDE open right here, and I have already installed Amazon Q CLI. So the next step that I'm going to do is I'm going to log into the queue. So to do that, I'm using my Windows laptop. So I have logged into the WSL of Ubuntu. And then within that, I have created a folder called AWS MCP diagrams that you see. And whatever diagrams that I'm going to create is going to be stored in this location, but you can also give in your specific natural language prompts a different folder or subdirectory where you want to store your diagrams that the MCP server is going to create for you. So as I mentioned, that the first step is to have the Amazon Q developer CLI installed. The second is you need to log into Q. So the step for doing login is use Q login. Now, as you see over here, it says already logged in. Please log out with a Q logout first. So I will show you the step of how to log in. And for installing and configuring Amazon Q Developer CLI, you need to have a AWS free builder ID. So make sure you create one free builder ID that you need to use when you're logging into Amazon Q Developer CLI. So I already have a free builder ID. I'm going to use that. So now I'm going to do a logout first. So now it says you're now logged out. Please run Q login to log back into Amazon Q. Now, when I issue Q login, it says there are a couple of login methods. The first one is used for free with builder ID, and there's another one which is used with pro license. So for our demo purpose, I'm going to use the free builder ID option. So I'm going to just press enter. And then it says, open this URL, and it gives a link to that that I need to open and in the browser. So I'm going to copy this, and I have my browser open over here. I'm going to paste it, click enter, and then it says authorization requested. So I'm going to just confirm and continue, and it says allow Amazon Q developer for command line to access your data, and I'm going to say allow access, and it says request approved. Now you can close this window and you can go back to your IDE. So if I come back to my IDE, if you see, it says device authorized and logged in successfully. Now, as I was showing in the deck before this, there are a few steps. The first step is installing Python 3.10 or newer. And then the second one, as I mentioned, GraphViz, which I've already installed. So I'm gonna skip that. And then the last one was to add the MCP servers into the mcp.json file. Now you have commands that you can execute one after another, and I'm going to share the blog post which talks about the specific commands that you need to issue to use those in your specific demo, and you can install all those in your environment. But what if I can take a detour and maybe use natural language to do all that for me? So let's do that quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an option called Q chat. So I'm going to chat and I'm going to give some natural language to do all that Python installation and adding those MCP servers into the mcp.json file. So I'm going to use Q chat, and it says now you're chatting with Claude for Sonnet. So I'm going to paste the prompt for installing Python 3.10 or newer, and also updating the mcp.json file after installing the necessary package from the AWS MCP GitHub repo. So let me copy paste the prompt that I'm going to use. So here I am saying I want to set up AWS diagram MCP server, execute this step. So install Python 3.10, install AWS diagram MCP server package. I've given the GitHub repo link. I've also used the AWS documentation MCP server for showing you one demo around using the best practices in the documentation MCP server. So I'm going to use it. So hence I've installed that. And I also asked to create the necessary MCP configuration file set mcp.json, and I've given the location to that. Now, for me, you might see that it might say that your Python is already installed, so it's gonna skip that part. But for you, if you are new and you haven't installed Python 3.10 or newer, it's going to do that for you. So let's enter this. And now it says, let's take the current Python version. So it says, asking allow me to trust it. So I'm gonna press T and enter. And it says it has found Python 3.10 already installed. So now it is moving to installing the AWS diagram MCP server. But before that, it is also checking all the pip packages that it needs, and then all the necessary prerequisites for cloning the MCP repo. Now it is cloning the MCP repo. It's automatically learning. It's not stopping if it is encountering any error. But now if you see over here, it says perfect. I can see both the AWS diagram MCP server and documentation, and it's reading the installation instructions from the documentation, and it is doing all the necessary legwork for me automatically. So it says I need to install GraphViz, which is required, and I have already installed GraphViz. So let's wait for this to complete, and then the next is gonna check all the GraphViz related prerequisites. Once that is done, is going to, now it says install successfully. Now it's going to create the necessary configuration for MCP servers. It's downloading all the tools and the icons that you need to create the AWS architecture diagrams. Now it's asking me, do you want me to update this with the necessary information? So it looks like it's the right one. So I'm gonna trust it. So I'm the operator, and I'm giving certain permissions for it to go and do the necessary actions for me. Once this is completed, I have a prompt that I'm going to use to create a diagram showing an EC2 instance in a VPC connecting to external S3 bucket. And I'm also going to include the necessary networking components, the security elements, and also ask it to clearly mark the connection between EC2 and S3 and label everything. So let's just wait for this to complete. And every time the tool tries to do some actions, it's going to ask me to use enter T to trust it. Meanwhile, I'm going to show you the location where the diagrams will be stored once it creates. And if you see in this specific folder, it has created a MCP server related subfolder as well as we speak. Now it says the AWS MCP server was installed successfully. Now it is going to install the last part of it, which is the documentation server. So finally, it gives me a response. Excellent, both MCP servers have been installed successfully. Now I need to update the MCP configuration file, and it has already done it because I've already trusted it initially. So everything looks to be completed, and I'm just waiting this to give me the next option to give me the prompt to create a diagram. So it's just testing it automatically to ensure everything looks good to him before he hands over to me as an operator. Now the testing is completed and all the MCP servers are installed properly with the corresponding configuration files. So I'm going to give a prompt to QChat stating, please create a diagram showing an EC2 instance in a VPC connecting to an external S3 bucket. Add the necessary networking components, the security elements, and clearly mark the connection between EC2 and S3. Label everything concisely and indicate that all resources are in US East 1 region. Check also for AWS documentation to ensure it adheres to AWS best practices before you create the diagram. So that's the natural language prompt for me to create the architecture diagram. And as I showed you, this folder is empty with no diagrams at this point. So now it has started the process of creating the diagram, and it says me to trust it, allow this action to search documentation. So it's reading the documentation, the VPC security best practices. It's asking to trust. Now, if you see over here, the documentation part is completed. It's now trying to pull the icons. Now it is trying to create the diagram with proper AWS architecture components. And it says to trust. I'm going to trust it. I wanted it to be more interactive. So in each and every step, I'm getting prompts of trusting it. You can trust it for the entire session as well. You can do that. So it says, perfect, I've created a comprehensive AWS architecture diagram. Here's what the diagram includes. So it gives you all the information over here. And if you see over here, it says the diagrams has been saved to this generated diagrams folder. Under that, there's a PNG file. You can also like create in JPG as well if you give prompts to create it in a different format like SVG. All right. Now, let me quickly show you the folder. So here is a generated diagram. If I open that, and I'm gonna open the PNG file that it created. So if you see over here, I'm gonna expand this. So it created a very nice looking architecture diagram with just few prompts and less than 30 seconds. with all the best practices included in it, right? Now, if you see over here, it is asking me for the next prompt. And it also has given all the architecture components, the best practice implement. You can copy paste this and put it in our uh, deck that you create with the architecture diagram. I'm gonna do one more quick round of testing with a little bit more complex real use case. So a real world example is something like an e-commerce platform, right? So let's do that. So I'm gonna give this prompt where I'm saying create a diagram for an e-commerce platform with microservices architecture. Include components for product catalog, shopping cart, checkout, payment processing, order management, user authentication. Ensure the architecture follows AWS best practices for scalability and security. Check for AWS documentation to ensure it adheres to AWS best practices before you create a diagram. So I'm gonna do that. Now it has started looking into the documentation. So it says I've created a comprehensive e-commerce microservices architecture diagram. These are all the best practices and what are the components that it has created. So it gives all the details over here. And now if I go back to the folder, I have another e-commerce microservices architecture diagram. And if I open it, if you see over here, it's nicely created with all the different components and different building blocks with front end users all the way to the back end, right? So I hope with this, uh, you have explored how to use Amazon Q CLI with the AWS documentation MCP and diagram MCP servers to create professional AWS architecture diagrams, in addition to adhering to the AWS best practices referenced from the official AWS documentation. This approach really helps you from an advantage like time savings, consistency, best practices, iterative refinement if you want to quickly modify through sample prompts, and also validating like checking architectures against official AWS documentation and recommendations. So as you continue your journey with AWS architecture diagrams, we encourage you to deepen your knowledge by learning more about the MCP protocol itself. And also I have given a couple of QR codes to the official blog post of how to create architecture diagrams using Amazon QCLI and AWS MCP diagram server. And also I've given the GitHub repo of the MCP diagram server in the second QR code. With that, I hope this session was useful. Please provide your feedback or comments. And thank you for listening to this session.